They were tiny, no bigger than the last joint of my pinky finger, and translucent, their tiny organs visible through their glassine flesh. Sometimes they would flit about my head on papery wings, and sometimes they would dance amongst the flower heads, their tiny mouths open as they sang melodies in an octave I couldn't hear. Nobody else could see them, though, and as I grew older, they either became invisible to me as well, or I grew up enough that my imagination couldn't sustain the reality of them. In the end, I realized they were just imaginary friends, exactly like the ones other children had. So I forgot about them. Being raised by a solo mother wasn't all bad. While we were excruciatingly poor, my mother devoted her time to me as much as she could. She was the central focus in my life, the person who loved me the most, the person who gave me life. Why she never remarried after my father left, I'll never know. She was beautiful, my mother, in a fragile, ethereal way, as though at any moment a strong wind could blow all of the substance out of her and leave only a skeletal web of spider silk strands behind. She attracted men, certainly. She was never short of friendly masculine helpers and admirers, but she shyly shunned them all to spend time with me, her only child. School wasn't easy for me, even though I had a good life. I was not a bright child or an eloquent child. I struggled and often fell behind. By the time I was 12, my only remarkable skills were my ability to endlessly daydream and a decent reading level. But I was happy enough. My mother's death swamped my small island of happiness with a raging tsunami from the deeps, destroying the fragile emotional stability I had and leaving a world of tide rack and wreckage, chilly and chaotic. The numb wait in the emergency room had ended with a sour-faced doctor explaining that my mother had died of a massive stroke brought on by an unknown cause. He advised me to call my nearest relative on the public phone and said they would conduct an autopsy to look further into cause of death. But I had no relatives to call. I had no aunts, no uncles, no grandparents, and no siblings. With the loss of my mother, I was 16 years old and utterly alone in the world. Lacking anyone else to call, I phoned my English teacher, Mrs. Ross, who picked me up in her VW Beetle and drove me home to the tiny house I had shared with my beloved mother. No one expected me back at school for a long time, so I took my time going through the small hoard of things my mother had collected over the years. She eschewed jewelry, but had a fine collection of secondhand clothes, all sized for her delicate frame by her own patient needlework, all lovingly folded and pressed with lavender. I remember holding those dresses to my mouth and breathing in her scent, the tears finally breaching my lingering shock and soaking the fragrant fabrics. Oh, Mother, I miss you so much. It was hard, desperately hard, to go through her possessions, each one stamped so indelibly with her unique character. Little boxes of seashells, feathers from rescued baby birds, save whiskers from our long-dead cat. There was a painted box that contained letters organized neatly by type and name, most of them from the men who admired her, most of them love letters. Bills and legal documents sat to one side, something I would need to deal with later. But at the bottom of the box was a blue-green envelope addressed to my mother in beautiful golden calligraphy. Inside was a single card of deep velvet paper, the same spidery calligraphy containing a message for my mother. Dear Elspeth, I am writing to congratulate you on the birth of your first child. It is such a shame I cannot be there for the christening. With love, your great aunt Raisa. On the reverse side of the envelope was a return address. The address of my only known living relative, the mysterious great-aunt Raisa. Despite the letter being 16 years old, my aunt was still in residence at the address listed, a curious old stone church that had been converted into an observatory at some point in its life, the onion dome replaced with a genuine dome, from which peeked the verdigris cannon of a bronze telescope. Cats wandered freely in a front yard fragrant with wildflowers, and the strains of a piano tinkled from inside the building. My knock on the door with a heavy brass knocker precipitated a halt to the music, and the sounds of boots approaching on a wooden floor. That Raisa was related to us, I had no doubt. The woman who opened the door was elderly, but her weathered flesh still had the delicate stamp of my mother's face and the bird-like build I shared with her. She gazed at me with her still sharp emerald eyes for a long moment, then stepped forward and enveloped me in a lavender-scented hug that tore away the last supports on the emotional dam I had been desperately propping up. She let me cry until there were no more tears, just ugly gulps and racking sobs. Then she led me to the neat, pretty kitchen and put a copper kettle on the gas stove. "How did she die?" my aunt finally asked. I explained about the stroke, the lack of underlying cause, my teacher taking me home, then going through my mother's things and finding the letter. As she placed the steaming tea in front of me, I asked the question that had been burning my tongue since I had got here. "Why did she never speak of you?" "Your mother and I had a falling out many years ago over an unpaid debt. I forgave her, but her pride wouldn't allow her to acknowledge me. But that's all in the past. You're here now, and I'll do everything I can to help you," she said. Relieved, wrung out, and deathly tired, I simply nodded. The first problem that Aunt Raisa helped me with was my mother's outstanding debts. Pressing a thick gold chain into my hand, my new aunt instructed me to sell the gold and settle my mother's debts with the money. I refused initially, but she insisted, saying, "I am your guardian now. It is my lot to provide for you and see that you live a good, fulfilling life. I won't take no for an answer." So, I took the chain on the condition I would pay her back someday. "You can pay me back by making me a promise," she said. "Promise me that you will always light a beeswax candle on your mother's birthday." The money from the gold was considerable, and it more than paid off the debts my mother had owed. Aunt Raisa put the remainder in an investment fund for me and promised I would get the money back when I turned 21. Although I am ashamed to admit it, Raisa turned out to be a better mother to me than my own. She was a hard taskmistress at times, tutoring me late into the evenings to bring my grades up at school and pushing me out of my natural predilection to be lazy and to daydream. Independently wealthy and owning the church and surrounding acres of the property, Raisa was able to provide a lifestyle that saw my acne vanish within months and my flabby middle tighten up with yard work and farm chores. I thanked her for everything she had done for me, asking how I could ever repay her. As she often did when I raised the issue of my debt to her, she would brush it off by making up some nebulous payment on the spot, like, "Always wish on a dandelion," or "Never raise your voice to an animal." I never thought she was particularly serious. After she set me up with a paid internship at a law firm, I met a young man the same age as me, named Liam. From a desperately poor urchin with failing grades and the aesthetic appeal of a toad, I had bloomed into a pretty, intelligent, focused young woman with a bright future. On my 21st birthday, Raisa gifted me the matured investment fund, which had been a runaway success and now totaled well over $50,000. Liam proposed, with an heirloom ring provided by my aunt, and we eventually married at the church amongst the cats, the flowers, and the scent of lavender. 3 months and 3 days after the wedding, Liam fell ill. The doctors were baffled. He was dropping weight at an alarming rate, and a constant lethargy afflicted him. The sickly sweet smell of Ensure plagued my days at the hospital, and I had to take an extended leave of absence from work. Aunt Raisa seemed distant during this time, even slightly off in some intangible way. Pressing her on the matter of Leon, I asked her why she had never visited him, why she didn't seem to care. But nothing was forthcoming. On life support now, my beloved husband, the most precious person in my life since my mother, would only rouse now for a few hours in a day, spending the rest comatose and barely breathing. "Is Aunt Raisa here?" he would often ask. When I told him that she never visited, he would say, "Oh, I thought I could hear her." The day that Liam died, he gripped my hand in his skeletal digits with a sudden and feverish strength. "I love you, Kaylin," he whispered, stroking the emerald and gold wedding band on my ring finger. "It's silly, but I feel this strangely heavy regret for not keeping my promise to your aunt." As the afternoon wore on, his vital signs deteriorated, and I was taken from the room. Just before midnight, Liam was proclaimed dead. For the second time in my brief existence, the love of my life had been taken from me. Raisa never attended the funeral, and when I returned to the church, I began packing my belongings in a grieving fury, angry beyond belief that she had been so callous, so inhuman in the face of my husband's death. When I pulled my suitcase into the hall, Raisa was there, as prim and authoritative as ever. "Yesterday was your mother's birthday," she said, pacing towards me. "It was also my husband's funeral," I spat back at her. "You didn't light a candle," she said. "Didn't you hear me? I was busy burying my husband." Raisa's bird-boned fingers snapped out and grabbed my wrist, her strength terrifying for someone so old and small. "You broke a promise." "I don't care." Wresting my arm from her grip, I hauled the suitcase to the door and called a cab on my phone. After a miserable half-hour wait in a miserable gray drizzle, the cab arrived, and I left my Aunt Raisa, vowing to never return. The money was gone. How Raisa had managed to repossess the investment money I couldn't fathom. The banks couldn't explain it. They said the money had never existed, and in fact I was desperately in arrears on a loan payment. Even worse, the payments to the funeral home had bounced, and a debt collection agency had left several nasty messages on my phone. I quickly contacted my new in-laws for assistance. They had paid half the cost of the service, but instead of the sympathy and understanding I expected, Liam's mother seemed distant, asking where I was staying and making hurried promises to settle the debts. 3 hours later, I was taken into custody by a pair of police officers, under arrest on suspicion of the death of Liam Harrison. It was, of course, my Aunt Raisa who was my first visitor. She was uncomfortable outside of her home, her domain, but she was still as in control as ever. "Kaylin, dear," she began, "come home with me. I can take all of this." She waved her hand distastefully at the surrounding police station. "Go away." "I don't understand," I replied, angry, confused. Come now, child. You don't think your good fortune up until now had been the result of hard work, do you? I didn't answer. I didn't want to think about it. If that stupid boy had kept his promise for the ring, none of this would have happened, she said. Cold needles flooded my stomach, then slithered up my spine and into the base of my skull. What did you do to Liam? Raisa's green eyes shone peculiarly in the fluorescent light of the interview room. I did nothing. The man himself broke the bargain. I do not enforce the consequences. Realization dawned on me. A rising blood moon on the dark landscape of my thoughts. The money, the candle on my mother's birthday, I said. The light in Raisa's eyes was not natural now. Eldritch fire, the likes of which I hadn't seen since I was a child, burned deep in her dilated pupils. In our family, dear Kaylin, promises are law, and pacts are for life. Choking on fear, I pushed back the chair to escape. Leaning forward with predatory speed, she trapped my hands on the tabletop. There is new life inside you, dear niece. Promise me the child, and this will all go away. Weeping, terrified, alone and grieving, I promised her my unborn child then and there. The charges were dropped with alarming alacrity, with an apology from the chief of staff and from Liam's family. Pathology had mixed up the lab results, which had pointed to me poisoning Liam, and I had been cleared of all wrongdoing. For Raisa, it was a return to the ebb and flow of life in the old stone church, of cats and herbs, chores and blossoms. Her niece was home, pregnant with child, and that child would eventually belong to her. Are you really my family? I had asked her, cats winding around my swollen ankles. Oh yes, she replied, though several measures more ancient than you suspect. The fairies I saw when I was a child, they were real, weren't they? Of course they were, dear niece. That was the last we spoke on the matter. It was the copper kettle, the brass knocker, the bronze-legged furniture, and the polished silverware that tipped the balance of power in my favor. I knew now that my aunt was something fey, something fairy and ancient. The lack of iron in the house had escaped my notice until now, but alerted to the lack of it, I had the upper hand. The iron cross had cost me next to nothing in the second-hand store, but it was more precious than any gemstone or trinket made of gold. Heavily pregnant now, I waited for Raisa in the exquisitely tidy kitchen of copper and brass. She smelled the iron immediately, her ageless face white with rage. Get rid of that now, she ordered. Fishing the crude necklace out from under my sweater, I thrust it in her face. Renounce your claim on my child. That's not how it works, she said. Holding the iron cross like a sword, I advanced on her. What do you mean? Promises can only be made or broken. They cannot be amended. Smoke was rising from Raisa's skin from proximity to the base metal, her skin darkening and blistering. Promise me you will never follow me then. Promise me you will leave me alone forever. I promise, she said. Backing away from the creature that was my aunt, I turned and fled from the house as fast as my strained legs would allow. True to her word, my aunt never followed. What would happen if she broke that promise, I do not know. But I suspect that whatever heritage we had in common meant that I would be the final arbiter of her punishment. Every night, I repeat the litany of little promises I made to her over the years. Always wish on dandelions, never raise your voice to an animal, never name the Messiah on so van, never view your reflection wearing red, always pick up a fallen chrysalis, always be in bed before midnight. For if I ever breach one of my promises, she will know, and she will exact her vengeance on me. 3 days ago, my daughter was born, and I took her home to the tiny flat I had rented with the small amount of money I had left. Lying on the Formica kitchen table was a blue-green envelope, addressed to me in beautiful golden handwriting. And inside was a card of darkest violet, bearing a message in spidery silver script. Dear Kaylin, I am writing to congratulate you on the birth of your first child. It is such a shame I cannot be there for the christening. With love, your great aunt Raisa. Thanks for watching. I love that story. All the evocative details and that creepy ending, gives me the shivers. Special thanks to the talented Redditor who gave me permission to read it. The link to the original story is in the description. Please like, comment, and share if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you're new. Oh, and I'd love to hear your requests. If you have or know of a fairy story, true or otherwise, that you would like me to read, or any other type of story for that matter, leave me a comment or send me a message. My email is in the description below. Until next time, this has been a visit from your Scary Fairy Godmother.